Okay, great. So good afternoon and welcome. Sorry for the delay. We're happy to have you join us. My name is Patricia Childers, and on behalf of AIGA DEC, welcome you to what's going to be an inspiring discussion. Uh, Please, everyone, if you could use the chat to let us know where you're coming from. We'd like to hear where everyone comes from, and this helps us in the future build our administration list. The DEC is a group of volunteers who create programming to enhance the ability of educators and institutions to prepare future designers for excellence. We showcase, support, and celebrate design educators in all design programs, including higher ed and K through 12. We are part of the AIGA, whose mission is to advanced design is a professional craft, a strategic advantage, and a vital cultural force. A little bit of housekeeping. If you can turn your audio off, we are going to be recording this and this will help us with the sound. We will take all questions at the end of our discussion, so you can please put them in the chat. Today's event is Building a Research Agenda. It's the second of a series of writing and publishing. Our next one will be on non-traditional forms of publishing. That will be on December 11th. After that, it will be followed by Elizabeth Resnick on women graphic designers, rebalancing the canon, and that will be on January 23rd. In today's event, Jessica Barness, Allie Place, Maggie Taft, and Jonathan Hanahan will share how they discover, develop, refine, and evolve their research. So let me do a brief introduction. Jessica Barness is a design scholar and a scholarly designer. Currently, she's professor and also co-chair and director of research initiatives for design incubation and serves on the editorial board for Cubic Journal. Her research on design discourse has been published internationally. She has an MFA in design from the University of Minnesota and a BA and MA in art from the University of Northern Iowa. Maggie Taft publishes books about design history and runs Writing Space, which provides artists and designers with workshops, writing groups, and other resources to support their research and writing prompts. Allie Place is a designer, educator, and writer whose work explores the intersection of design and feminist theory as a space for critical making and radical speculation. She's the author of Feminist Designer on the Personal and Political in Design, which illuminates design as a feminist practice through essays, case studies, and dialogues. She's currently an assistant professor, educator in the College of Design, Architecture, Art, and Planning at the University of Cincinnati. She earned an MFA in Experience Design from Miami University of Ohio, as well as bachelor's degree in graphic design and journalism from the University of University of Cincinnati. Jonathan Hanahan is a researcher, critical designer, and educator exploring the complex relationships between humans and technology. His work harnesses technology to critique its own impact upon speculative, sensory, and cultural inquiry. He founded the Sensory and Ambient Interface Lab, SAIL, to design alternatives to screen-based interaction, envisioning ambient and non-visual interfaces that harmonize with daily life. An associate professor at Washington University at St. Louis, he also serves as founding chair of the Masters of Design in HCI and Emerging Technologies program. So let's begin. We are having a bit of an open discussion, and we're going to start by describing how you, the speakers, how did you and how do you find a research topic? Not just a research topic, but one that you're truly interested in. Maggie, you want to start us off?
Sure. So I thought I would talk about two different projects and the process by which I landed on each topic. I would say that My research practice is a bit associative, by which I mean there are larger concerns that animate my different projects, but I often land on a new project by way of things that spark in a prior project. But at different moments, I've come to specific projects in different ways. So I thought I would be really kind of specific about some of those. So one project, maybe like my first book project, was about Danish design and why it became so popular after World War II in the United States. Like, how did design from this small Scandinavian country become this aesthetic and cultural force? And that project had originated in my dissertation. And so I needed a research project. Like, I was not trained as a designer, but as an art historian. And so the bread and butter of that degree was research and writing, and I needed a dissertation project. And this was around 2010 when I was seeing Danish design everywhere. Like, if you went into West Elm or Crate and Barrel, Danish design was the style, or mid-century modern was the style that you so often saw being advertised. And I liked it too, and my friends liked it, and I wanted to know why. So in this particular case, the research project came from my own observations about the world and consideration of how the things that I was finding myself drawn to, the design that I was interested in, had also this historical resonance. And I wanted to kind of trace that historical resonance. So this is an example of a case where my research was coming out of something that I was noticing in the world and a curiosity I had to better understand the cultural phenomenon. But in order to write that research project, I also had to do a lot of reading first, in order to see, like, was this question had this question already been answered? And as I read, I saw that some people had offered answers, but in a kind of improv way, my response was yes. And like, what they were saying made sense, but I thought there was more to the story that hadn't been accounted for. And so I wanted to understand these other threads in the narrative that I didn't really see represented in the research or accounted for in the research. The other example of a project I wanted to give was I'm currently working on a project about shaker material culture, and that is a project that I got started on because someone invited me to be part of a research group. And so in this particular instance, I was invited to be part of something and then had to kind of find my own angle on it. And here, for the purposes of this project, the first thing I did was I read a lot. I wanted to really understand what people were saying about Shaker material culture, what the scholarship, contemporary scholarship was looking like. And similarly, I saw that there were these really interesting strands in the discourse, but they just seemed like they accounted for certain things, and there were other parts of the material record and the archival record that were not accounted for in the scholarship. And so I got really excited about pursuing some of that and putting it in conversation with the scholarship that was already happening. And so just to sort of like, out of those two anecdotes, propose like a few takeaways that I was sort of thinking through as I reflected on this conversation. One way I've come upon research is by looking at the world around me and asking questions and being curious about why things look the way they do or operate the way they do, and then digging into scholarship that already exists, research that already exists, to see if I can find answers there. And if those answers don't seem adequate, then that seems like one way to find a research project, like to pursue those questions further in order to add on to the existing scholarship. Another way when I was brought into a project was to just get really familiar with the research area, like go to museums and look at objects, read popular and academic articles and books that have been written, visit historic sites, and just see what pings. I really like this idea of what pings. Like, what have I been drawn to? Even if I don't know why, what have I been drawn to? And just kind of keeping track of that to then see, am I noticing any common threads across the different things that have been interesting to me? And if so, maybe that's an area to pursue further. Maybe that's a body of objects or materials out of which I can propose a research question. Does that resonate with any of you guys, Jonathan or Allie or Jess?
Sorry, Patricia's like, are you frozen?
Yeah.
Or mute.
Okay.
Sorry, I was frozen. That was incredibly interesting. I have a lot of notes, and now I think I can write a whole book. Um, let's hear some more.
Oh my
Jessica,
God.
you want to talk?
Gary's. Am I okay to go ahead?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here. Um, my the way I approach research topics, I guess there's two different ways this has happened for me. My background is very much in art and design practice. I was working for about a decade as a graphic designer in Chicago before going back for my MFA. And so as part of grad school, I knew I wanted to start writing. I didn't know how to do that. I hadn't done any real writing as part of my job previously. And I ended up doing a graduate minor in writing studies to try to kickstart that part of me. And the path I found going into a tenure track position at a research university was that I needed to be writing about the creative work that I was doing, but in a way that was publishable and presentable and made sense. What I ended up doing and what I've actually developed a course to teach is writing about creative work in the sense that you're doing creative work that investigates something, whether it's a theory, a phenomenon, a concept, an idea, that the creative work itself is a research inquiry, and then that can be written about. And so that's the path I took for a long time. It still kind of is, even though it's shifting a little bit. I would have to say, Maggie, I think you call this pings. For me, it's like the little irritating things that are little sparks of curiosity that capture my interest. Lots of times it's wondering why things look a certain way, why they function a certain way, how are designers talking about certain things. And that's so my research and writing about my creative investigations evolved into almost like researching things that I found puzzling or things I needed to kind of sort out. And that is taking me into a research agenda now that really is primarily writing based. Um, the writing projects I have currently, I've got one larger one that investigates design conversations online, which is leading me down a very strange path, actually. I just discovered a tool with a colleague that lets me scrape Twitter data. So this is evolving into something I hadn't expected. And I have found that the writing process and the needs of an article or a chapter or a book or something kind of drive me to discover new ways of uncovering material. In a nutshell, that's how I find my topics. They almost always connect with design practice in some way. And that's become a core part of what I do. They almost always connect with visual language, but I don't write about a specific medium or technique or area of design. I very much don't have a specialty in that way. And maybe my specialty is that I look at all these different things and it's all the things all the time, which also makes it also difficult to describe what I do. And I kind of landed on, that's part of my bio that Patricia read, is I consider myself to be a scholarly designer and a design scholar. And it's kind of both of those things back and forth. As I'm working on a very intensive writing project currently, I've also got ideas for an illustration series I want to do. I don't know when I'm going to be able to start that, but I expect I'm going to be writing about that at some point as well. I found that these two things, creative work and writing for me, they're so intertwined, and I think I need those two things to intertwine for me to make sense, and it also helps me to apply it to the teaching that I do. And that's an important part of my writing and research practice as well.
Great. Thank you. So, Allie, can we hear from you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here and thank you to the DEC for inviting us. Um, I think those are really two really wonderful answers to this question that I get to build on.
Mhm.
So the way that I see research working in our field is that it's not simply about pursuing a passion project, although that is often sometimes what we're doing. To me, it is about producing knowledge that moves the field forward. And the challenge doing that is typically finding a way to marry your own interests with a pursuit that moves the field forward in some way. Um, and I think what's challenging about that is that you have to really understand the field to know where there's a gap in it. And you have to know where it's been, you have to know where it's going, because your efforts should aim to fill a gap that you have identified, just as Maggie and Jessica also said. Um, so to me, that's not about harnessing trends. It's not about reacting to discourse. To me, it is about really taking a long view of the way that we practice, the way that we produce knowledge, the way that we um, generate our discourse as a field, and finding a way that your voice can move it forward in some way that you think you believe that it needs to shift, a something that you believe has been overlooked. You know, what do you want to resist? What do you want to retell a narrative about? So to me, that's where my own research practice stemmed from, was identifying a gap in the field and pursuing efforts to fill that gap. The reason I did that is because the gap affected me very directly. So as as Maggie also said, my primary research thread evolved out of my graduate studies and my thesis in the years around 2015, 2016. I was doing what I think most graduate students do, which is selecting a thesis topic that felt very visceral and felt very personal and felt very meaningful in and of a moment. And I was conducting design research about um, views about feminism, the way that people understood it, the way that people were shifting their views about it, the way that discourse around it was changing during an election season. And so the way that I was conducting this design research was not aligning with the ways that I understood feminism to be practiced. And I was very, very hungry for guidance and insight and expertise on how to do design research that aligned with feminist theory. I had a great deal of feminist theory that I read and studied. I had tremendous feminist scholars, feminist researchers who shared knowledge and established practices around conducting feminist research, but they weren't designers. And so I found myself kind of scrounging for, a few papers here, a few speakers there, a book that was 25 years old. There were resources out there where there were people out there. It was information that was hard to find at the time. And so by the time I finished my thesis, and I felt like I did not have the resources that I needed to truly not just guide me, but to make me see things differently, to really um, expand my understanding of design in our field. So that sent me on a trajectory on the tenure track, which involved aiming to fill that gap by collecting resources and connecting with people and collaborating with people and doing my best to document the ways that people were practicing feminist design or doing design research in feminist ways, um, and compiling that into a resource that was readily available for students, graduate students, educators, and of course, practitioners. Um, so my efforts really were very deliberately about filling a gap in the field. Of course, it stemmed from my own interests. It stemmed from my own my personal passion about the subject matter. But it also, I wanted to add this. I think it's really critical that you don't. Not only do you need to understand the field, where it's been, where it's going, where you want it to go. It's also really important to have the self-awareness to understand where your skills are best used and best applied. Um, I I have been a practicing designer for many, many years, but my primary skill set is actually writing. I was trained as a writer through my through all of my schooling, and I also obtained a journalism degree in my undergraduate studies. So there was something about writing that was very it felt like the right place for me to activate this research agenda, this research project or projects. It's a you know a multitude of projects. One of them was a book, but many other things. So understanding that that's how my skill set was best applied to that effort was really critical. And just as Jessica said, understanding that being a designer and being a writer are two really different things, but they can also work together in really beautiful ways that um, complement each other and also generate insight within each other. So I think that self-awareness is also really critical of understanding your skill set and how it best contributes.
Thanks,
Is that
Allie.
me?
That was great. Yeah, sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
No, it's great. Thanks for having me. It's great to see so many friendly Zoom names on not as many faces, a bunch of names. Uh, but I think those are all great answers. I think I have I come from a sort of an assemblaged background in architecture and design, and have just always I always tell the story that like I am not an architect, but I would never trade that education for the way that I think about my own research and the way that I think about being a designer, in that everything that I'm pursuing is always about the the threshold between physical and digital experiences. I'm like really fascinated about where those things overlap, where they fragment, where they're like sort of entwined in like really, sometimes seemingly magical and sometimes seemingly like really complicated and fraught conditions. So I always have viewed, like many on the panel, like a lot of this came out of a graduate thesis that was driven by, I mean, maybe the simplest way is I feel like a research agenda is like a super selfish thing. Like I'm just trying to understand, like selfishly understand the world, and uh, and how I feel about it, and then create moments for others to also reflect on how they interact and feel about the world. So a lot of my work kind of went through two phases. I had like my sort of graduate school and tenure track work, which was very intentionally disruptive of the the sort of physical digital divide. I was constantly trying to create these installations, artifacts, activities, etc., that like intentionally disrupted familiar experiences, um, and create opportunities for myself and an audience to reflect on how they relate to that or what that means to them personally. Not to subscribe that this is the answer, but to create situations that would allow personal reflection and observations. And this will probably uh, this is probably like front loading what maybe some of the things we'll talk about later, but that was like a difficult space to navigate because it wasn't owned by any one discipline. And so it wasn't like I was practicing as an artist, but I wasn't an artist who was like making any money selling art, you know? But I was a designer who wasn't doing client facing work that was making, and so like I was taking the bad parts out of all these different things and sticking them together. Um, but I mean, I liked it. It was fun. I like enjoyed what I was doing, and it was again personally uh informative to kind of like wrestle with these things that I didn't really understand and I wanted to understand. Um, and the second phase of the work is I think still built on this like contending with the what the implications of an overlapping physical and digital world are, but actually on the other side of it is saying now, like, rather than disrupting it, how can we start to like to think about um, more elegant strategies of synthesizing those spaces and this idea of um, trying to play around with a world, not only like a physical world, but also like design methodologies that would inform more elegant and interesting ways that digital experiences are embedded in our life. I just got really sick of this idea of just like stick a screen in the space and that makes it digital, or like put it on some glasses, right? And so, which has been an interesting process because like what I'm doing now is really taking this whole history of visual design principles and saying like, well, what if we just get rid of them and we had to do it a different way? And not to say that I want to get rid of visual artifacts or digital screens or et cetera, but um, my current lab kind of is establishing these constraints that we're only going to work on things where a screen is not practical or available. How would we solve this problem if we didn't have a screen? And trying to build a toolkit of methods and strategies that could apply to a broader digital ecosystem that says like, if 99% of what we do as designers is visually oriented, especially digital, and then we sprinkle these other sensory things on top to like alert us to look at a thing or distract us to look at this thing and get information, like, is there a world where those other sensory things could actually be the interface themselves and provide that information? And again, to encourage a future methodology or pedagogy that is like not 99% visual and 1% other, but is actually like 80-20, right? Like what if 20% of what the design skills we use or the strategies or the feedback systems we use are not just visually oriented? How would those things support one another? Um, so it balances a little bit of this sort of like this new work has a lot of like commercial application. It's getting a lot of interest from like the Department of Defense, which kind of freaks me out, and I don't really know what to do with that. But it's interesting. I'm excited that um, design is it's an example of design. I think playing a leadership role in like work that is like that has the potential to have like substantial impact and not just a service or a support structure to these other innovative places. There's been strategies in the process that I'm that's like another side of my work, both as an academic and a researcher and an administrator, is that like I feel like design should be the leader in these conversations and not just like the support structure that makes other people's stuff like makes people buy other people's stuff or makes innovative work go out in the like I feel like we are the ones that can be driving that conversation. And so strategically positioning projects and agendas in ways that bring the rest of the world into design as opposed to exporting design to everybody else is a kind of a piece of that as well.
Thank you. Really interesting discussion. And some of the threads that are kind of pulling it together that I've been making notes on are, you were just talking, Jonathan, about changing positioning. And you were talking about disruptive and Maggie's talking about searching and Allie's trying to, looking for this information that doesn't really exist for a need. And Jessica is also talking about, being expanding on things. Changing the dialogue. So there's a passion the way that you all speak about this. Have you ever had this situation where we could think about maybe things that are going on now where all of a sudden your passion or your way of wanting to change it to put design forward, to have design have the voice, was that ever did you ever have a problem promoting that? Did it ever kind of not fit into your space or was maybe not allowed anymore? You weren't able to kind of put this idea forward. And I'm thinking kind of a little bit about what's happening to some of us because of the contemporary political situation. And if we do, or if you did, what might you do about it? It's a roundabout way question, but and I'm asking because there's so much of that, we're hearing so much about that, of that going on now. And what you're doing is just, it's looking for answers and putting it out there. What if your answers aren't what's agreed upon at this point or discouraged from being heard? Maggie?
Well, I went first last time, so it seems
Oh,
like
okay.
Alex maybe just about to unmute. So Allie, if that's true, like,
Okay, go ahead, Allie.
I'll take that question. Um, well, my first thought, yeah, there is a passion, but I really appreciated that Jonathan described this as a very selfish pursuit because there is so much ego that goes into it, and we have to acknowledge that. I always tell people that I wrote the book that I needed because I wanted it to exist. And I just hoped and had a feeling that other people needed it too. And just went with that belief as my motivation, as my contribution to the field. But I think my research in particular sits at, well, I don't know, Jonathan's working with the Department of Defense. Maybe you're maybe you're in the
I'm
crosshairs
not yet.
or
I'm not yet, but I don't know how to handle that. Like,
um my research is political. The nature of all of my research is political, and it has been very interesting. Let's say since like 2017 when I got on the tenure track and really started pursuing a deliberate research agenda. My research interests have gone from being the hottest of hot topics that publishers were dying to print books about to being something that I'm not allowed to talk about in the classroom anymore. And that's not that long. That's like 7 years time for something, for a shift like that to happen. I cannot say that I have an answer on what to do with that and how to handle that. I will say that my job right now is I'm just paying attention. I'm paying attention um, and I'm thinking about where things are going from here. But I will say that in the long view, what that makes me know for certain in my bones is that um, you know, work work of any kind, activism, organizing, research, writing, whatever it is, that swings in our political discourse from popular to vilified, from of interest politically or economically to being completely devalued. That means there's something there. That means there's substance there that has real material impact on people's lives and our field. Um, and it's just your job to stick with it and to stay the course, and to not be moved by the whims of our political climates or our rapidly shifting popular discourse or social media environments. All of those things are um, the moment to moment changes feel so meaningful in the short term, but they're not as meaningful in the long term. And it's our job, I believe, to just stay the course and to keep the long view, and to know that if someone is outlawing your research topic from a college campus, there's something very important about the work that you're doing. So that's all I know for certain.
I'd like to add to that. Allie and I are in the same state, so it there are some real challenges. Um, my current project gets into design ethics, and it's current, and so I'm writing this in the midst of all this happening, and I'm realizing how much it's um, influencing my thought patterns and how I write about something. I haven't really landed on what that's going to look like quite yet. This is very much in progress, but there are certainly topics, even among within the design community, that are hot topics. They're debates, and that's what I'm focusing on currently. This isn't quite about politics so much, but something I wanted to share with the group here in case anyone is struggling with the thing that I struggled with for many years, is like, what do you do if your research doesn't fit within the design discipline? And that was me for a very long time. And when I started my position here at Kent, I realized I was doing research that was very different from my colleagues, and I didn't quite know where to take it. Um, I realized I had a collaboration that was connecting with the digital humanities. I was presenting at conferences for like literature and modern languages, um, spaces that I wasn't necessarily comfortable in, and yet I found that's where my research was going. But it was about design at the same time. And I was fortunate that one of my colleagues, who's now retired, told me one day, so I was like, should I even be doing this? I don't have tenure. I'm going to a literature conference that's super tiny in like Atlanta. Like, should I even be doing this? And she said, Jess, that is exactly what you should be doing. And the advice I got was that the kinds of work we're doing as designers and design researchers can connect with all these other areas. And there are journals in those other areas. There are conferences in those areas, and those are worth pursuing. Definitely, if you are tenure track, check with your colleagues, check with your chair, make sure these things are okay, and acceptable. But I do think there are spaces for the things that we're doing. I would say for all of us on this panel, our work, it could be published and researched within design. It could also connect with other fields. And I think that's something important to keep in mind. If you feel like it doesn't belong somewhere, try somewhere else.
I would love to talk a little bit more about that, about a feeling of work not fitting. And I think before I do, I also want to say, Patricia, you characterized passion as like a shared feature among all of us. I might say for myself, I don't know if for others too, I might characterize it less as passion and more as curiosity.
Mhm.
And I think for me, it's a meaningful distinction because curiosity, I think, allows, in my mind, me to start from a place of not knowing, of like being uncertain, of not being clear on the exact shape of things or the exact reason why things look the way they do, or whatever the question is. But the not knowing is really important to me, and also I think has like characterized a lot of my relationship to research. Like what Ali said about finding the gap is so critical, and like having the long view of the field. And it was also something that I always really struggle to find confidence in. Like I never really felt like I had a firm enough grasp because there was always more to learn. And so I think like another way into this, and this is where I'm going to like start talking about what Jessica was saying about like the work not fitting. So I wanted to share an anecdote from an artist, Fahim Majid, that he told me some years ago as he was describing his experience in graduate school. So he was getting his degree in Chicago, and he was going to art school at UIC, University of Illinois Chicago, and also working as a curator at the Southside Community Art Center. Those institutions were geographically very close and sort of intellectually extremely different. And he was bringing some of the work that had been doing at the Southside Community Art Center into the art that he was making and showing at crits at UIC. And his professors were basically like, who cares? Like, I don't care about this. And he would leave the crits, and one crit in particular, so angry that people didn't care about what he was working on. So it just felt like there wasn't space for the things that he was interested in the particular institution, or this particular institution that he was affiliated with. And then he started thinking about it more, and he realized that what he really needed to do was just give people more on-ramps to the work. So people who already cared about Margaret Burroughs, a designer, institution maker in Chicago, champion of like Black creative culture, they already would have an on-ramp into the work that he was doing. For people who didn't, were there other ways that he could make connections between this material and the things that they were caring about? And I think that this is that story has become a little bit of like a beacon for me in terms of thinking about another approach to developing resonant research, even if you don't feel like you know where the gaps are because you have such a firm grasp on the field. Like instead figuring out, what am I interested in? What do I want to know? And then trying to determine in real and meaningful ways how it resonates with the things that you see other people caring about, which doesn't mean changing your research in order to be in line with what other people are working on, but rather just means figuring out like, how can I create more doors into this that lots of other people can open, and so that they can see this thing that I'm working, no matter how niche it may seem, really matters also for what they're working on. And I think that's a way of starting, like it's a kind of inverse approach to the one that Ali offered, where you're starting maybe even with something very small and then kind of building out connective tissue so that other people can care about it as well. And it also does require like familiarity with the field, and maybe even a long view with the field, but it can be a little having that grasp doesn't need to precede the research. It can be something you figure out in concert with carrying out the localized research on your particular area.
Yeah, I was going to add to this conversation around fitting in or being supported is like it's a weird push-pull because like especially in the tenure track, you're like um you you're carving, you're trying to create your own space that is valued by like why so it has these norms that like the discipline or whatever expects, but you're not going to get tenure if you just follow those norms, right? So a lot of it is strategically thinking about how you lobby this throughout the process. Like I remember in a previous event, like I if I go back to the tenure process, like I wouldn't if I could look at the kind of guidelines that our university has for getting tenure as a designer or getting tenure as an artist, and like I would never fill both either of those buckets, but I could fill buckets from both, which forced me to like create a different argument for why I should get tenure. But it's also that's that's the ammunition to like make that happen, is that this is carving out and challenging and pushing a space in an unexpected way. So I feel like if anybody feels uncomfortable that like people don't get what they're doing, it's been said a couple of different ways. Like that's probably a good thing. And like leaning on your community or this community or others to help uh, define and articulate that is super valuable. I think, a lot of this game is also being strategic about um, how you I love the opening doors narrative and the idea of like selling this or positioning it that it has value in lots of different spaces and not just this sort of this niche or this very specific thing. So, I mean, one of the things, again, I kind of mentioned this before, that I'm really interested in is like the flipping the momentum energy of like design going out into the world and actually bringing the world into the design space and letting that be the center of these conversations. I mean, there's a huge reason, and I don't even know if I was allowed to do this, but like when this sale thing came together, there was a very intentional decision to call it a lab and not a studio because of how it was read across the university. And like I don't know if there's like rules for what defines what, but it positions it's open doors for like people to come into that space because that language is valued very differently. And I think there's there's strategic opportunities. I mean, another big thing that I'm trying to figure out is like, how come every other discipline can get these multi-million-dollar grants and it's like we're fighting over $50? And so, like, if I call this a lab and I start like saying design has value to the NSF and the NIH and all these sort of things, it starts to turn that momentum a little. So again, like there's for me a part of this, I'm realizing more and more that my research is specific to an output, but it's actually about like kind of moving or trying to move the space that we're sort of slotted into, and think about I think that in an increasingly fraught and contentious environment that the people in this Zoom window are the ones that should be leading those conversations and not waiting for these other innovative disciplines to kind of drive that show. So
Thank you all. We're at almost at 4 o'clock at time, but I'd actually like to put a couple of questions in, and I understand if anybody has to leave, but we did start late. Are you open to taking questions, Jonathan, Maggie,
yeah, I'm
and
fine.
Yeah.
Jessica? Okay, great. So one of them, there's two. One, Shannon Zenner wants to hear your panel's perspective on using AI in research. Are they opposed? Are they using it for some elements but not others? It is a big discussion now. Can it be used? How can it be used? Do you use it?
Yes.
Yes. for some things, just some things.
I mean, I would love to hear the rest of the group's positioning on from a research and from a like a publishing perspective. Um, but in from a process perspective, um, it has a huge. I mean, and again, from a my work is always this like tension between like being terrified of a thing and being absolutely in love with that thing at the same time. And this is a great space to do that. Is that like so a lot of my work is like exploring new ways to integrate new tools and software to collaborate with those things, but also being really skeptical and critical of those things. Um, I think from the the practice of design, um, I'll just say that I think this is like as I'm like recruiting students who are freaking out about like this and like what that means for their career potential. I think this is actually this is a very important and exciting moment for design that is um, moving us closer to the center of being like the most important piece in the puzzle. And so the way that that gets integrated into process, like I was listening to CNBC the other day, and the chairman of Cisco was talking on television about how their UX designers are like almost engineers now, and the that like power position that it puts them in does two things. One, it now puts the group in a space to be able to um, like it changes the dynamic of like the engineering building and then the designer designing, but it brings that to the center. But it also creates more time to focus on the quality, craft, and experience of those processes. So rather than like this priority on just like make it work and then we'll figure it out later, and all these bodies that we need to do that, it now puts the designer, I think, in a really exciting position to be at the center of that. And and so I think it has to be through curriculum, through research, all like finding and exploring ways to evolve processes and be nimble with tools like this is super important and exciting. I think, I mean, I understand there is obviously lots of fraught, contentious issues that we have to work through, but I think it is through the work of designers designing interfaces with these tools that will define what the future of those things will really be.
So when I hear you talk about that, Jonathan, I hear you thinking about the possibilities that it opens up, but also as you're using it in your own practice, doing it in a very critical and a critical way that's really oriented towards learning how to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that seems like the essential piece in making the decision to use it, like to use it in a way that's critical and attentive to its limitations, its flaws, but also its possibilities. And I feel like anecdotally, that is not frequently the way that it's used.
Yeah.
I don't use it at all. And it's really important for me that like especially writing up ideas is an essential part of the research process for me. It is the way that I actually transform something like a thought into an idea. Like it is through writing that I come to learn what I really think about something or develop insights or like through the work of careful description come to understand new things. And so for me, like that process of writing is not something that I want to outsource to AI as a kind of tool of convenience, a way of using it that would not be critical, that would not be oriented towards learning it, but would rather just be like okay, I'm in a rush and I just need to get it done so AI can do it for me because
So
I don't think it would it wouldn't be worth my time, and it wouldn't be worth anyone else's
I,
time.
I totally agree, and I think I think my positioning is that there is a huge difference between using AI and working with AI in a hierarchical context, in a conversational context, and I think you're right that this using is an outsourcing of stuff I don't want to do, and it's a binary, this is right and this is wrong, but the withness understands that everybody in that relationship is flawed in some way, and some like you might be wrong, I might be wrong, but we're gonna figure it out. Like we're there's a dialogue and a conversation that I think is really interesting to explore. So I totally um I'm interested in this sort of like and this is not about knowledge creation. This is a process oriented approach, but that sort of collaborative relationship and I mean, at the end of the day, my work has always been about a relationship with technology and what is that, good or bad, and kind of like what I'm working through, both to study it, but also in my process as a maker of stuff.
I'll say that I use writing similarly to how Maggie described it. Like that's literally how I sort through my ideas and things like that. I have used AI, not for generating like my writing at all. That's all from like here. But I do use it to help me organize my time, and that's because there are many moving parts to the things that I do on a daily basis, at a weekly basis, monthly, and it has helped me figure out process strategies for like literally how I use my time or what steps I need to take for a certain part of the research that I'm doing. And so it's not like it's generating any content or knowledge. It's more just like help me unscramble what's in my head because I need to figure this all out. And it's like an assistant in that way. Um, I think this is a very like important topic to be discussed. Thank you for asking it because I think the difference between using it and working with it. Um, and we're just at the beginning stages of that, really.
Can I tell you something that completely changed my perspective on that relationship that I didn't even think about, but I think is the most powerful it is the most powerful relationship I have with artificial intelligence is that uh, in any prompt, in anything that I'm doing, before I do ask it to do it, I ask it to ask me questions to reinforce what it is I'm actually asking. And it is such a powerful, so I'll be trying to do something and I'll say, ask me any clarifying question. Before you do this, ask me any clarifying questions. And that experience of having to reflect on what I'm actually trying to do is I find so powerful and interesting, right? Because it makes me all of this is about articulation, and it's like makes me articulate the thing in a way that I didn't know that I needed to or how to do. And like and it's like it's so delightful, the questions that you get asked and like have to think about. So I just learned that in a thing, and I thought, why did I never think of to do that? And now it's completely changed any from the most menial things to the most serious things, like how I operate in that relationship.
Thank you. I feel like we could have a whole hour just talking about this relationship and how different people use it. Um, and I always want to ask, so how do you do that? But let's move on. So Elizabeth Resnick asks, what sustains your passion and curiosity when your schedule becomes overwhelming? And Elizabeth just came out with a huge book, so which to me seems overwhelming. But there's a couple of other questions that I'm going to kind of throw in with that. Imri asks, how do you test drive your ideas? And then Lauren asks, if you're curious about everything, how do you pick between two or more topics? So it's, if you are curious about everything, how do you pick? How do you test drive? And how do you do that how do you schedule that? Jessica uses AI, she just said, but for anybody else.
Patricia, can I go?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'll lump a few of these questions together. And then I have to go because I have to pick up my kids.
Okay.
Um,
Sorry for going over. We started late and I just want to let it roll a little bit longer.
no,
Thank you for
that's okay.
staying, everyone.
Um, I want to quickly answer the AI question just because I don't mind being like the voice in the room who's like deeply anti-AI. I'll say this, generative AI is a deeply anti-feminist project, like through and through. And I'm working on a new thread of my research that explores that, and working on writing about that. I won't go into it right now because we can have a very, very long discussion about that. I do not use it, but I'm deeply invested in the discourse around it and the way that it's shaping the field. But especially as an educator, I'm mostly interested in how this is shaping teaching, and how this is shaping, the humans that we're sending out into the design field. So that's where my stake is, on that topic. But I do not use it. I don't find it useful. Um, but I think there are some other good questions. Uh, Thank you, Elizabeth, for that question about scheduling because that's an important one too. Um, I. I feel that question really deeply because my second child was born 6 days before my book was published, and just the feeling of there just being so much going on and too much happening, and the obligation that research suddenly becomes of just, publish or perish type of attitude. I think for me personally, the passion and curiosity just stems from my own humanity and my own stake in whatever subject area that I'm exploring, especially related my research related to reproductive justice, because that was a thread of my research that exploded when I was pregnant with my second child in a state where abortion was banned, and I was scared for my life. So there's always something personal about what I'm doing in my research and that personal connection, whether it's a personal connection to someone else, a personal connection to an experience, or a personal connection to, a subject area or a field. So, I think having that personal passion or curiosity, that is something that's really important for me. And I would say to the person who asked about picking between topics, I would say do all of them until you decide you don't want to do one anymore. And that's kind of like the weird and fun part about starting out is that you should be doing lots of different things. Your gut will tell you when you should not keep doing one of those things. And you just have to trust that. So start out with a big wide net if you must, two, three more, threads of interest. And you'll get feedback. You'll get responsive, feedback, or you'll get like a gut feeling that tells you like this is it or this is not it. And I think that intuition is a really critical part of your abilities in your role. So um, that's it for me. I'm going to sign off, but thank you so much, Patricia, and thank you to the other panelists. This was really wonderful being with you. But I got to go pick up my kids now. So have a
Thanks,
great
Thanks,
night.
Maria.
Allie.
Thanks.
Can I build on what Ali was saying a little
Yes,
bit?
please.
So I fully agree. Like, cultivate a few projects simultaneously. Maybe you'll find that as you go further with them, they intersect in interesting ways. But also, I think that what Ali said about your gut will tell you if you should stop working on one is right. And also, um, if you are like talking to other people casually, there might be some projects that are met with more curiosity and enthusiasm and excitement than others, which might be one signal that, ooh, there's something here that's maybe a little more ripe. Or if you have spaces in which you can like do a writing group or small presentations, like at a professional context where, it's like a 10-minute presentation, I think that's a great opportunity to try out research. I think design incubations, Pechakuchas are also like a really great place to try out new ideas and see what is the response I'm getting here. Does it seem like there's enthusiasm as I pursue it further? Do I continue to be interested? As far as the question about time pressures go, Um, I've learned a lot from some friends of mine who, as their lives have changed, have also adapted their research methods. So, like one friend, Liat Verdugo, she's a designer artist out in San Francisco. She used to, spend like her whole weekend would be dedicated to research. And as she had new responsibilities come into her life and she could no longer really like have 9 hour uninterrupted days where she wasn't teaching to just immerse herself in her work, she programmed for herself a bot that every day would send her, or every day on the hour between 8 p.m. and 5 p.m., it would send her an image from this archive that she was trying to research. So it would interrupt her. And she would start to just like build up this familiarity with the archive because it was interrupting her day. Another friend, this is a novelist. He had kids, couldn't spend the same time writing as he used to be able to. And so he would deliberately get to school pickup every day 10 minutes early and write on his phone for 10 minutes. And, those specific examples may not work for you. Maybe you don't know how to program a bot, or you don't want to be interrupted every hour on the hour, or maybe like writing on your phone is not the mode for you. But I offer those examples not because you need to do just that, rather because I think they're really good models of how one of the ways to respond to time pressures is to get creative about different ways to engage your research. So just because you don't have the three uninterrupted hours in the morning anymore doesn't mean it's impossible to keep going with research, but rather maybe it's an opportunity to just develop different working methods, or find different rhythms and patterns. And that can be really hard, especially if like the way you've done it has worked for you and you would prefer to continue doing it that way. But if it's not possible, then I think it's sort of a necessity to figure out what new habits you can establish to make it be possible to keep doing the research.
Great, thanks. So we've got maybe just a couple of minutes left. Jessica and Jonathan, any great insight?
Um, I can just add a couple bits of advice that have helped me, especially with Lauren's question and also with Ermi's question. Um, I found that having a number one, I mean, when you have an idea, document it somewhere. Doesn't matter where it is. Keep track of these things. It may just incubate in your mind for the next 5 years. It'll come out at some point, so it's worth holding on to that. Um, I I have my own like notebook system of things, and so I have like on paper, all my ideas are sitting on paper in these various notebooks, ready to go at some point. So I don't find that I'm choosing between a couple. I think the stuff I work on is also related. One project relates to another project in some way that it's okay to work on these things kind of in rotation. Um, Maybe have one primary project and then some smaller ones, like shorter term. I think it's useful. I also would say collaborate with people. If it's a totally different experience, it helps you test drive things. It gives you someone to talk about it with and expand your ideas. And sometimes that balance, maybe even an imbalance, is okay to do like some solo stuff as well as collaborative stuff. Can help you work through some of those ideas and realize them a little bit sooner than if you were doing everything on your own or everything with the same team even. It just helps you to expand the possibilities of what you can do.
Yeah, I was gonna say the um I think it's also helpful to like give yourself some empathy too, in that like we live in this weird world. We work in this weird world where like we don't really clock in and clock out. And like we're sort of always, so I have Raphael, this artist Raphael Rosendahl gave me these two principles that really, because I struggle with that too. I would my parents would come visit and they'd be like, "Are you working today?" And I'm like, Of course I'm working. Just because I am not like going to work at 9 o'clock and coming. Yes, uh, and it still frustrates me. So we live in this world where we're sort of always working and never working at the same, I feel like at the same time. And that balance of like, I totally agree with Maggie's comments about like finding those spots, like those little spots between things. But I also had, one thing I had to do, and because increasingly, it feels like every day the windows of time get smaller and smaller, is that I had to define that a productive day was getting one thing done. And like that could be writing an email, or that could be sitting down and working for 6 hours on a thing. But like some days that one thing just has to get done and it's still a productive day. And that just gives you at least some off ramp to think that like if I'm not sitting at my desk 9 hours a day, I'm in trouble. That's it. That's not gonna, it doesn't work that way. So like that little positioning has helped and then can catalyze more creative ways to kind of find those gaps.
Thanks. Right. I want to thank our guests again. This was really interesting. I've got pages and pages of notes. Thank you all for coming, and I apologize again for the links. Um, let's give a huge round of applause to everyone. This has been really, really so interesting. Thank you for sharing. And thank you again, all of our guests, for coming. Look forward to seeing you next month and in January. And hopefully, I'll see you all soon, if not in person, online. Thank you. Thank you so much, Maggie. Oh, you're muted.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me. I didn't know if you wanted to do any kind of like postmortem, but seems like
Everyone's gone. Yeah, I'm so sorry. It's like I feel like always screw up these details, but we got it going, and it was really very, very interesting.
We got it going.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fun to be in conversation with that group. So thanks so much for putting it together. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Great. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.